Think about the last time you felt wrongly accused of something. Maybe a friend assumed the worst about your intentions. Maybe a colleague misread your silence as arrogance. Maybe a family member twisted your words in front of everyone and sat back waiting for your reaction. And what did you do? You explained yourself. You clarified. You defended your position carefully and patiently. You laid out all the facts. You practically built a courtroom case for your own innocence in a casual conversation. And here's the question that most people never stop to ask. Did it actually help? Did the explanation make them understand you better? Did they soften? Did they admit they were wrong? Did the situation resolve itself with warmth and mutual respect? Or, and this is what really happens in most cases, did they find a new angle to question you? Did they move the goalposts? Did the more you explained, the more suspicious they seemed to become? Did your patience somehow look like guilt? That's not an accident. That is human psychology working exactly as it was designed to work. And once you truly understand what happens the moment you stop explaining, your entire relationship with how you defend yourself, how you present yourself, and how you respond to manipulation will change completely. Machiavelli wrote something that most people find uncomfortable the first time they read it. He understood that power rarely comes from those who speak the most. It comes from those who reveal the least and observe the most. This video is about that principle. It's about what your constant need to explain yourself actually signals to the world. It's about why silence in the right moments is not weakness, it is a test. And it's about what you discover when you finally let people sit with their own assumptions, because what they do next will tell you everything. Before we move forward, drop this in the comments. I no longer owe the world an explanation. Let's begin. 1. The exhausting habit of over-explaining slowness. There is a particular type of exhaustion that nobody talks about honestly. It is not the exhaustion that comes from physical work. It is not the tiredness after a long day or a sleepless night. It is the specific, soul-draining exhaustion of feeling constantly misunderstood and constantly trying to fix it. Most people who over-explain do not even realize they are doing it. It does not feel like weakness. It feels like honesty. It feels like communication. It feels like the responsible, mature thing to do. You want people to understand your true intentions. You want fairness. You want to be seen accurately. And so you explain. You explain why you made a certain choice. You explain why your words did not mean what someone thought. You explain your past decisions, your current reasoning, your future plans. You clarify, revisit, rephrase. You send long messages. You have long conversations. You replay things in your head and craft better explanations for next time. And underneath all of it, if you are honest with yourself, there is a quiet fear. The fear that if you do not explain, people will think badly of you. That silence will be interpreted as guilt. That if you do not correct the record immediately, the wrong version of you will solidify in someone's mind forever. That fear is understandable, but it is also a trap. Here is what the habit of constant explanation actually communicates to the people around you, especially the ones paying close attention. It signals insecurity. It signals that their opinion holds enormous power over your peace. It signals that you believe you need their approval to feel settled inside yourself. And some people, consciously or not, will use that signal against you. Think about it from a purely observational standpoint. When you watch someone who never over-explains, someone who makes a decision, says a few words, and then moves forward without anxiously checking whether everyone agrees, how do you feel about them? Most people feel a quiet form of respect. There is something solid about that person, something self-possessed. You sense they are not performing for you. They are simply existing. Now compare that to someone who always has a long explanation ready. Every decision comes with a justification. Every action comes with context. Every silence gets filled with words. Over time, even people who genuinely like that person start to feel something shift. The explanations begin to feel defensive. The constant justifications begin to feel like the person protests too much. The very effort to be understood starts creating a different kind of distance. Machiavelli understood the political version of this principle clearly. In his observations of rulers and power structures, he noted that leaders who constantly justified their decisions to the public were perceived as weaker than those who acted with quiet authority. Not because the explanations were wrong, but because the need to explain suggested a dependency on public approval, and dependency is always a vulnerability. This does not mean communication is bad. Clarity between people who genuinely trust each other is healthy. But there is an enormous difference between choosing to share your reasoning with someone who has earned that access and reflexively defending yourself to anyone who raises an eyebrow. The first is connection. The second is emotional servitude, and most people live trapped in the second without realizing it. Drop this affirmation in the comments. My peace does not depend on their understanding. 2. What silence actually reveals here is the part that most people find uncomfortable. When you stop explaining yourself, not forever, not to everyone, but strategically in moments where the explanation has already failed, something unexpected happens. The situation does not freeze. It does not wait politely for you to return. It moves, it develops, and the people involved in it reveal themselves. This is the quiet power Machiavelli observed in those who knew how to hold back. Silence creates a vacuum, and people who are driven by ego, manipulation, or performance cannot resist filling that vacuum. When they expect your defense and your defense does not come, they keep going. They escalate, they press harder, they say more, and in doing more, they show more. Think about a specific situation. Someone accuses you of something unfair in a group setting. Maybe they imply you did something you did not do. Maybe they twist a story slightly to make you look bad, and they wait for your explanation, your defense, your correction. Normally, you would rush in immediately. You would clarify your side. You would feel the social pressure of the room and try to balance it by providing facts, context, logic. But what happens if instead you simply pause? You look at them calmly. You say nothing immediately. Maybe you say very quietly, interesting. And then you let the silence exist. Watch what they do. Some people, the ones who made an honest mistake, will feel immediately uncomfortable. They will soften. They will add, well, I could be wrong about some details. Their discomfort is the discomfort of genuine regret. They were not attacking you. They misspoke, and now the silence is giving them room to correct themselves. But other people will not soften. Other people will take your silence as an invitation to continue. They will press harder. They will look around the room for agreement. They will add more accusations, more assumptions, more exaggeration. They will show in that moment of your stillness exactly what they were doing from the beginning, not expressing an honest concern, but performing for an audience, not seeking truth, but seeking a reaction from you to feel powerful. Your silence did not create that behavior. It revealed it. This is one of the most important things you will ever understand about difficult people. They do not become toxic when you stop explaining. They were already toxic. Your constant explanations were simply preventing you from seeing it clearly because you were too busy managing their reaction to observe their character. Explanation is often a distraction from observation. When you are explaining, you are focused inward, on your own defense, your own clarity, your own performance of innocence. You are watching yourself. But when you stop and go quiet, you can finally watch them. And what you see during your silence is information that no conversation could have given you. Because in conversation, people edit themselves. In response to your silence, they respond automatically, and automatic responses reveal true character. People who genuinely care about you will become curious or concerned. They will ask questions. They will try to understand what you are thinking. They will stay close to you even when you do not explain. People who were using you for emotional performance will become frustrated, irritated, or absent. Because without your participation in the dynamic they created, there is no dynamic left, and the performance requires an audience. Without a reaction from you, it collapses. That collapse is information. Take it seriously. 3. The psychology behind why we explain too much. Before you can change this pattern, you have to understand where it comes from. Nobody is born with the compulsive need to over-explain. It is learned, usually in childhood, usually in an environment where keeping peace required constant justification, where getting something wrong meant emotional punishment, where the adults around you were unpredictable enough that you learned to manage their feelings by carefully explaining your own. Children who grow up in homes with critical, demanding, or emotionally volatile parents learn early that an unexplained action is a dangerous action. If you come home late and say nothing, there is trouble. But if you come home late and immediately explain every detail, who you were with, why it happened, why it will not happen again, maybe the emotional temperature drops. Maybe you are safe. That strategy works in childhood. It is adaptive, it protects, but carried into adult life, it becomes a liability because it trains you to believe that your safety depends on other people's understanding of you. That if someone misunderstands your intentions, the threat is real and immediate and must be neutralized quickly through words. So you explain, you clarify, you offer evidence, you build your case, even when no one asked for a trial. The deeper problem is that this pattern makes you permanently reactive. Your emotional state is always one misunderstanding away from destabilization. Someone raises an eyebrow and you feel the internal alarm go off. Someone misreads a text and you immediately begin composing a careful response. Someone says something slightly critical and your whole day reorganizes itself around addressing it. You are not living your life. You are managing everybody's perception of your life, and that is an exhausting, thankless full-time job that pays nothing. Machiavelli observed this vulnerability in people and described it as a form of political weakness. A person who requires constant validation from others is always partially owned by those others. Their mood, their confidence, their decisions, all of it becomes partially dependent on how others respond, and that dependency can be exploited. The moment someone learns that you are uncomfortable with being misunderstood, they have found a lever. Not necessarily consciously, not always with malicious intent, but a lever nonetheless. They can create uncertainty in you simply by going quiet, by looking at you a certain way, by withholding approval, and you will work to restore their positive view of you, sometimes at the cost of your own dignity. Real freedom begins when you reach a specific realization. You cannot control what other people think of you. You cannot. No amount of explaining, no amount of evidence, no amount of patience or careful phrasing will guarantee that someone who has decided to misunderstand you will change their mind. Because sometimes the misunderstanding is not an accident. Sometimes it is a choice, and no explanation cures a choice. Once you absorb this fully, something in you relaxes. The compulsion to explain loses its urgency, because you finally understand that the explanation was never really for them. It was for you, a ritual you were performing to manage your own anxiety. And when you find other, quieter ways to manage that anxiety, the ritual becomes unnecessary. You become gradually someone who does not need to be understood by everyone to feel at peace with themselves. That is not coldness. That is freedom. 4. The 3 people you should never over-explain yourself to. Not all silence is the same. And this is important to understand clearly because some people interpret this message as never explain yourself to anyone. That is not the lesson. The lesson is more specific. There are certain categories of people in your life to whom your explanations will never land, never matter, and never help. And recognizing these 3 types will save you enormous amounts of emotional energy over the course of your life. The first type, the person who has already decided. You have met this person. Before you even open your mouth, the verdict is in. They have formed an opinion about you, about your choices, your character, your situation, and every explanation you offer will be filtered through that preformed conclusion. If you explain your reasoning, they find a way to reinterpret it as confirmation of what they already believed. If you provide evidence, they find a reason to doubt it. If you change behavior, they describe it as suspicious rather than genuine. With this person, explanation does not change minds. It only gives them more material to work with. Your silence, on the other hand, gives them nothing. And silence can be profoundly disorienting to someone whose position depends entirely on your participation in an argument with them. When you stop defending, you remove the target, and without a target, their certainty often begins to look, even to themselves, like something manufactured. The second type, the person who uses your explanation as ammunition. This is the most dangerous category. These people ask questions that look like genuine curiosity but function as intelligence gathering. They want to understand your reasoning not because they care about you, but because your explanation reveals your insecurities, your weaknesses, your fears, and that information gets used in future arguments, in social settings, sometimes years later. You will recognize this person in retrospect more often than in the moment. You will remember a conversation where you opened up, explained your reasoning in detail, shared something vulnerable, and later found that information surfacing in ways that hurt you, used to embarrass you, used to control you, used to win arguments by exploiting something you willingly handed over. With this person, the rule is simple. The less you explain, the less power you transfer. The third type, the person who is emotionally unavailable for understanding. This is perhaps the saddest category because it includes people you genuinely love, parents, partners, close friends, people who, for reasons of their own emotional architecture, are simply not able to receive your explanation in the spirit you intended it. Not because they are malicious, not because they have decided against you, but because their own wounds, their own ego, their own unresolved emotional material creates a filter so thick that your words cannot get through it cleanly. You can explain and explain to this person and walk away feeling more misunderstood when you started. Because the problem was never the explanation. The problem is that genuine understanding between you two requires more internal work from them than they are currently capable of doing. With this person, more words are not the answer. They may never be the answer, and accepting that, painfully, is sometimes the most loving thing you can do for them and for yourself. In all three cases, silence is not giving up. It is choosing reality over performance. Drop this in the comments. I give my explanations only to those who deserve them. 5. The Machiavellian test of character. Here is the principle at the heart of this entire video, stated as directly as possible. Your silence is a test, and most people fail it. Not because they are bad people, but because how someone responds to your silence tells you who they actually are beneath the social performance. And most of us, most of the time, are so busy talking, defending, and explaining that we never run the test long enough to see the results. When you go quiet, truly quiet, not dramatically silent, not punishing someone with cold silence, but genuinely calm and still and unexplained, you create a moment of pure social exposure. And what people do in that exposure is who they are. The person of genuine goodwill will sit with you in the silence. They will not panic. They will not pressure you. They may gently say, "Is everything okay?" with real warmth. They will trust that you have your reasons. They will not make your silence about them. They will simply stay close. The person with a healthy ego will be slightly uncomfortable, but will eventually move forward without resentment. They may check in once, accept your quiet response, and not require more from you than you are offering. They trust the relationship enough to tolerate uncertainty. The person who is insecure and controlling will immediately become unsettled. Your silence is threatening to them because it removes their ability to manage the situation through your words. They will push for an explanation. They will interpret the silence as rejection, judgment, or punishment. They will escalate emotionally. And when you still do not explain, they will say things that reveal the architecture of how they think about you, what they believe they are owed, and how they behave when they feel their control slipping. Those things they say, that is the truth of the relationship, finally becoming visible. The person who was manipulating you will react with the specific anger of someone whose lever has stopped working. There is a distinctive quality to this anger. It is not the pain of someone who feels genuinely hurt by your distance. It is the frustration of someone who has lost a tool. It comes with entitlement, as though your explanations were a service you owed them and have now wrongfully withdrawn. And when you recognize that quality, it clarifies everything about the dynamic that came before. Machiavelli was ruthlessly clear about this. You learn almost nothing about people when everything is comfortable. You learn everything about them the moment comfort is removed. The test is not what someone says when they want something from you. The test is what they do when they are no longer getting it. Your silence removes comfort, and what emerges from that removal is real. This is why emotionally intelligent people do not panic when they are misunderstood. They wait. They observe. They let the situation develop, because they know that the response to their silence will be far more informative than anything they could have learned from a conversation. 6. The 6 principles of purposeful silence. Understanding this is one thing. Living it is another, because the habit of over-explaining is deeply conditioned, and old habits resist change with tremendous force. These 6 principles are practical. Use them. Principle 1. Distinguish between clarifying and defending. Not all explanation is over-explanation. There is a meaningful difference between offering clarity in a relationship built on mutual respect and defending yourself to someone who has already decided against you. Before you begin any explanation, ask one question. Does this person genuinely want to understand me, or are they expecting me to perform? If they want to understand, speak. If they want a performance, stay quiet. Principle 2. Let the accusation hang in the air. The next time someone says something unfair or inaccurate about you, try this. Do not respond immediately. Let the statement exist without your reaction for a full moment, sometimes longer. Watch what happens in the space between the accusation and your response. Often, the accusation begins to collapse on its own. Other people in the room notice. The person who made it becomes uncomfortable. The silence communicates your confidence in a way that words never could. Principle 3. Replace explanation with questions. When you feel the urge to explain, sometimes the most powerful move is to turn the conversation around with a simple question. What makes you say that? Or what were you expecting? These questions are not confrontational. They are clarifying, but in the opposite direction. Now they have to explain themselves to you, and very often what they say in response will be more revealing than anything you could have said in your own defense. Principle 4. Make peace with being misread. This is the hardest principle because it requires genuine internal work. You have to reach a point where someone misunderstanding you does not destabilize your sense of yourself. This does not happen overnight. It is the result of gradually building a more grounded relationship with your own identity, one that does not require external validation to remain intact. A useful practice. Write down who you are, what you value, and what your actual intentions were in situations where you were misunderstood. Keep that record. Read it when you feel the pull toward over-explanation. Remind yourself that the truth of who you are exists independent of anyone else's ability to see it. Their blindness is not evidence of your guilt. Principle 5. End conversations that require you to perform. Some conversations are genuinely productive. Two people who respect each other working toward mutual understanding. That is worth having. But some conversations are traps disguised as discussions. You can tell the difference by tracking your emotional state during and after. A healthy conversation leaves you feeling, even if slightly drained, generally clearer and more connected. A performance conversation leaves you feeling hollow, used, and somehow worse than when you started, despite having won or explained successfully. You are allowed to exit conversations that exist only to drain you. You do not need a dramatic exit. You do not need to announce what you are doing. A simple, "I think we've covered this enough for now," and a genuine shift of focus is sufficient. The discomfort in their face when you do this is data. Healthy people accept endings. Controllers do not. Principle 6. Let time do the work. One of the hardest things to trust, and one of the most reliable, is time. In most situations where you have been misunderstood or falsely accused, time reveals the truth more effectively than your words ever could. Your consistent behavior, your character over months and years, will communicate what no single explanation in any single moment can. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He wrote that a prince who consistently acts in alignment with his values does not need to defend his reputation word by word. The reputation builds itself slowly and solidly through the weight of accumulated evidence, and that kind of reputation is far more resistant to attack than any reputation defended through frantic explanation. Be patient with time. Act consistently. Let your life be the argument. 7. What happens when you finally stop here is what nobody tells you about the decision to stop over-explaining. At first, it feels terrible. The silence feels reckless. You will feel the pull to speak intensely, almost physically, like a hand reaching for something it has always grabbed automatically. The anxiety will feel like evidence that you are doing something wrong. You will worry that you are being misunderstood more than ever. You will wonder if people think poorly of you now that you are not correcting the record. This phase is real. Expect it. Do not interpret it as a sign that the approach is wrong, because here's what comes after. You start to notice which people stay close when you stop performing. You see, perhaps for the first time, who genuinely values your presence and not just your emotional participation in their narrative. And that group is almost always smaller than you thought it would be. But the relief of finally seeing it clearly is enormous. You start to feel something that is difficult to name, but that psychologists sometimes call differentiation. A sense of yourself as a distinct person who exists and has value independent of anyone else's opinion, not in a detached or arrogant way, but in the way a tree has roots. You do not need the wind to tell you that you are standing. You simply are. Your energy changes. This is perhaps the most practically noticeable shift. The mental bandwidth that you were spending on defending yourself, replaying conversations, crafting better explanations, all of that becomes available for other things. Real things. Your goals, your relationships with people who genuinely reciprocate, your own creative and emotional life. You become, slowly, harder to manipulate. Not because you become suspicious of everyone, but because your self-worth is no longer dangling on the outside of your body where anyone passing by can grab it. It moves inward, more protected, more stable, less available for casual disruption. And here's something almost mathematical about it. The less you need people to understand you, the more naturally they tend to respect you. Because the energy of someone who requires your approval is actually slightly repelling. You can feel the need coming off them, and it creates a subtle pressure. But the energy of someone who is comfortable in their own existence is magnetic. You feel safe around it. You feel that this person is not going to make demands on your emotional world. That is real influence. The kind Machiavelli identified not in the loudest voices in any room, but in the people who moved through rooms without needing them. Let's return to where we started. The person at the family gathering who said something cutting and smiled, the colleague who twisted your words, the friend who assumed the worst. You have spent so much energy trying to be understood by those people. You have explained, clarified, revisited, and defended. And in all that effort, you have been watching yourself, not them. Stop watching yourself. Watch them instead. The next time you feel the urge to over-explain, pause. Let the silence hold for just a moment longer than is comfortable, and observe what fills that silence from the other person's side. Because in that moment, they will tell you everything, not with the words say during comfortable conversations, with what they do when the structure of your explanation is removed, with what emerges when they are no longer reacting to your defense, but simply existing in your stillness. Some people will surprise you with grace. Hold on to those people. Others will surprise you with something less pleasant. Hold on to that information more tightly than you hold on to them. Machiavelli's greatest insight was not about cruelty or manipulation. It was about observation. It was about removing the noise of performance long enough to see what is actually real. And in your personal life, your greatest act of self-respect may be exactly that, removing the noise of your own defense long enough to finally see who is actually standing in front of you. Your silence is not weakness. It is the most powerful test you will ever run, and you will only get the results when you stop filling the space with words. So stop filling it. If this message hit you somewhere real, take a moment before you move on. Think about who in your life you've been over-explaining yourself to. Think about what you might discover if you simply went quiet. Like the video if it added something to your thinking. Share it with someone who needs permission to stop defending themselves. Subscribe to stay connected to more content like this. And before you leave, drop this in the comments. I no longer explain myself to those who have already decided.